Hey guys, welcome back to another video of Gems of War. I'm LootWizard, and this is the top 20 Underworld non-legendary troops. So in my previous video, I went over the top 10 legendary troops from the Underworld. This one is non-legendary troops, and I did a top 20 for this because there's just so much more troops in there besides legendary. You have every faction that's released has 4 troops released for it, and one of those is legendary, and 3 of them are non-legendary. So there is way more troops to choose from the non-legendaries, and that's why this is a top 20. So coming in at place rank number 20 is the Shaman of Set. Now, there are other generators for red besides this troop here that you can use that may be better. There are things like Hellcat, which you can transform a selected mana color to red. There are empowered troops that will convert brown to red. Things like that. That might be better than this troop. This one doesn't have empowered. I won't start with 50%, 100% mana, any of that. You're going to have the straight 12 mana to get up before you can cast it. But the great thing about this troop is you can choose a color on the board and then create red gems equal to the number of gems of that color. Now, that could be pretty amazing because if you have like 10 red gems on the board and then you have like, let's say 10 blue gems, well, if you select blue, it's going to create 10 more red gems and you'll get like 20 out in that scenario, 20 red gems, and that'll definitely give you a extra turn with a 4 or 5 match. Now, it does say it will inflict bleed on a random enemy, and that's not really that important. You're going to probably use this mostly for just the generating of red mana. But bleed, although it isn't really that powerful right now, in the future, if they ever release like a mythic troop that will do lethal damage to enemies that have bleed on them, bleed could become really powerful in the future. We have Scorpius, which will do lethal damage on poisoned enemies, so it's possible we could get a mythic troop in the future that could do that for bleed. But yeah, this is rank 20, Shaman of Set. And you can get this in the Fang More Underworld faction. My number 19 is the Infernal Machine. Now, this is a pretty new troop that came out recently. You can get this down in the Depths of Sin faction there in the Underworld. Now, this one creates 8 skulls or doom skulls boosted by your souls, and then it will summon an Iron Jaw. So it can summon a troop, but that's I wanted to rank this troop a little bit higher, actually, because the damage potential is pretty amazing in this troop. The boost ratio, which kind of got cut out of this picture when I cropped out the card information for this slide, the boost ratio is 10 to 1. So for every 10 souls you have, it's going to generate or create 1 more skull or doom skull. So with 1 Pharaoh's Ra, you can get the maximum souls up to 100. And when you do that, you're going to have another 10 skulls created with this on top of the 8. So that would be 18. Now, if you have 2 Pharaoh's Ra, I think it's around 160 maximum of souls. So just imagine, and I did test this out. What I did was I took Mountain Crusher at the top. This was a team that I just tried out recently with this troop. Mountain Crusher at the top, and then I did the Infernal Machine, and then 2 Pharaoh's Ra. And once you cast the Pharaoh's Ra like twice, and then once you do that, you have maximum souls. And if you cast the Infernal Machine at that point, like it's like a third of the entire board just gets turned into skulls. It can be pretty powerful. The reason why I put it at 19 is because it really does rely on having something like Pharaoh's Ra in the team so you can get your maximum souls. And Pharaoh's Ra probably is the best troop to use with this troop, just because it's the best troop for souls. So, with that in mind, that's why this one is down at 19. Moving on to 18, we have Iron Jaw. This is another troop from the same faction, the Depths of Sin. Now, this one is really kind of a defender troop. It has a damage reduction from skulls by 50%, and it will destroy all skulls. So this is a pretty safe troop for a defender because it's going to also gain 26 life and armor boosted by skulls destroyed. And so, but by destroying the skulls, it will keep the board kind of clean of any of those skull matches that the enemy could get against you. Plus, it's gaining that life and that armor. The only thing that would make it better is if it gained barrier, but it does not. But that's why it's here at number 18. So moving on to number 17, we have the Scarab Knight from the Deep Hive faction. This troop here can start with 50% mana because it is a wild folk, and I think we do have a legendary troop now that can make knights start with 50% mana. So either way with that, you can get it to start with 50% mana. Now, this is a really good defender. It's a little better than the other one that I just showed off because it gains barrier. It'll gain barrier and 29 armor, and then it has some 25 chance boosted by gems to gain an extra turn or half its mana back. And it also does reduce damage from skulls by 50%. So that's a pretty good defender right there. A pretty good defense troop to put right at the top of your team, because every time you cast it, you're going to gain armor and barrier. Moving on to number 16, we have the Necrocorn from the Silver Necropolis. And this troop here is an undead beast troop. So since it's a beast, if you do put in the Forest Guardian with it, you can get it to start with 50% mana. But that would be redundant because right in its ability, it will already start with 50% mana if you unlock that trait. What it does is it cleanses and it blesses an ally. It creates 10 gems of one of their mana colors. So it's a mana generator, but the fact that it cleanses and it blesses is pretty nice. Bless will keep your troop or your hero weapon from being devoured, for example, and things like that. So pretty good there, generating 10 gems. Most mana generating troops will generate somewhere around like maybe 8 gems or something like that. 10 gives you just a couple extra gems, gives you that extra chance of getting a 4 or 5 match. Moving on to number 15, this is the Akluran Leech. And I don't know if I'm saying the name of that right, but it's from the All-Seeing Eye faction. It is a monster troop. It starts with 50% mana. It will explode 4 gems and steal 22 attack from the first enemy. So stealing attack is really good because it will reduce the attack of the enemy. And since it's from the first enemy, that's the enemy that's going to be doing the attack damage. Now, the only thing is this troop does not have any kind of damage mitigation from skulls. So if you do put this troop at the very top of the team, the only thing that's going to save it from taking massive skull damage is its ability, stealing the attack. So you could do it that way, and hopefully you're going to cast it enough times in order to get that attack down on the enemy. But you could also put it like at the bottom of your team, and every time you cast it, at least you would be stealing attack. And in that case, if the enemy did kill everything, your attack would probably be pretty high once it got down to this troop. So, number 15. Moving on to 14, we have another defense troop. Right here, it reduces damage from skulls by 33%. This is the Wild Knight. It's from the Wild Court down in the Underworld. It will explode a gem. It will gain 26 life and attack boosted by green gems destroyed, and it gains barrier. So I think this is why this one is number 14 above the Scarab Knight and that other one, the Iron Jaw, I believe it was called. This one is better than those because it will gain life and attack, and also it gains barrier. So that's great. I mean, it's gaining the barrier, which is awesome, and then it's gaining not only life, but it's gaining attack. So that means that every time you connect a skull match, as long as this is at the top of your team, you're going to be doing that extra damage. So that's really good. That's why it comes in at a higher rank for me than those other ones. Moving on to number 13, we have the Copycat from the Mirrored Halls faction. And this troop here is another mana generator. It will create 10 gems of an ally's mana color. And then there's a 50% chance to summon a copy of that ally. So, for example, if you are running a team where, let's say, you have like Mountain Crusher at the top and Tina 9000 underneath that, and then you have this troop below that, if your hero gets taken out and you cast the Copycat on Tina 9000, there's a 50% chance that it will summon a copy of Tina 9000. This works with mythics, it works with legendary cards. And it can really help you survive a battle. So not only is it generating mana, but it has that 50% chance to summon a copy of your legendary or mythic troops. And that's why this one is ranked higher than the that other, let's go back here, which one am I thinking? This one right here, the Necrocorn. It generates 10 gems and it blesses and it cleanses. But I think that the Copycat is better, and that's why I'm ranking it higher, because it has that 50% chance to summon. All right, moving on to 12 as we get closer to our top 10. This one, Blade Wing from the Stone Song Eerie. This is a Strix troop, and it is pretty good when it works. It deals 33 damage to an enemy, and if there is a storm active, she has a 20% chance to kill them. So this is lethal damage. Now, it's only 20%, so that's why I said it's good when it works. So this troop works best with other troops that are going to have a constant storm going. Things like Umberwolf or things like Skady. Even classes like the Stormcaller class or the Sunspear class, because you have that constant storm going every single turn. That means that every time you cast this troop, it's going to have that 20% chance of lethal damage. Moving on to number 11, we have the Harpy, and this is from the same faction, the Stone Song Eerie. This is a Strix troop as well. And one thing I forgot to mention on the other troop, and it's kind of blocked off by the card here, but there is a 5% chance on its final trait. Both of these have a 5% chance when your turn begins to summon a Harpy. So that's something significant there as well about these troops. But this one, the Harpy, is pretty darn good as a support troop because it will give life to all allies. For me here it says 21. If there is a storm active, it'll drain 4 mana from all enemies. So that's pretty darn good. Not only is it giving life to all of our allies, but then if there's that storm, we can drain 4 mana from all enemies, and that, as you all know and have probably all experienced at some point, draining mana can be pretty pretty annoying and pretty obnoxious. So, it's nice to do it to the enemy, but it's not fun when it happens to you. So now we're going into our top 10, guys. Top 10. This here is the Watch Mother, All-Seeing Eye, from the All-Seeing Eye faction in the Underworld. Now the Watch Mother, this troop here, as you can see, I've already meddled it because it's a lower rarity, but it's a pretty good support troop. For being a low rarity troop here, it will give all other allies 29 life, boosted by green gems and skulls on the board, and then it will summon one of 2 different types of troops. So it has a summon, and it's giving life to all allies for a very low mana cost of 11. I think it's a fantastic support troop, and that is why it's my number 10. Number 9, we have the Akluren, All-Seeing Eye. It is a monster troop, and it will deal 30 damage to the 2 weakest enemies and transform brown gems to green to boost the effect. So for me here, at the very least, it's going to do 60 damage, and it's going to transform colored brown gems to green, and since it takes green mana, it's generating mana for itself. So I think this is a pretty good troop for just straight up damage, and it can cycle into itself with that transformation of mana, and that's why it makes my number 9. Number 8, we have the Horned Asp. This is from the Fang Moor faction in the Underworld. It starts with 75% mana, and it only has 11 mana cost. I mean, this thing it has a very cheap mana cost, even without the 75 mana start. But yeah, this thing can get powered up really quickly. It deals 32 splash damage to an enemy, and it will inflict bleed and poison on all enemies hit by this spell. Now, like I said about bleed earlier on, is that there could be a mythic troop that comes out eventually where if it does damage to an enemy that has bleed, it will do lethal damage possibly. But this will inflict bleed and poison. So we already have a mythic troop, Scorpius, that will do lethal damage on poisoned enemies. And there is a meta team for Explorer battles. It's like Mountain Crusher, Scorpius, Leprechaun, and then Urali. And Urali is it's a mythic troop that when you fully trade it, it will poison all enemies on a 4 or 5 gem match. Now, there might be some of you out there that already have Scorpius, but you don't have Urali yet, so you have to rely on another troop in order to poison the enemies before you actually cast Scorpius in order to do that lethal damage. Horned Asp, I think, is a really good substitute for Urali because it has a cheap mana cost. You can get it powered up quickly, and it will do the splash damage is going to do, it's going to hit the initial target, and then it will hit the adjacent targets. So you're always going to be able to affect 3 troops out of the 4 with this ability. And since Scorpius always hits the last 2 enemies, you can pretty much guarantee with casting the Horned Asp here that you're going to get those last 2 poisoned, unless they're immune to poison. So that's number 8 because it has that potential with that lethal damage. Number 7 is the Hex Rat from the Dark Pits faction. It is a Wild Folk Mystic, and Wild Folk can start with 50% mana if you have that one legendary troop, King Selnus. And this troop here is actually pretty good. It deals 30 damage to an enemy and all enemies below them. If the enemy is cursed, deal double damage and death mark them. So it can do double damage if the enemy is cursed. So if you have a way to curse enemies pretty good and consistently, and you include this troop in here, instead of doing the 30 damage, it can do 60 damage to all them. Now, 30 damage is still pretty good for the 13 mana cost, and you can cut that in half, like I said. So the other nice thing about this damage type is that it's not a damage to all enemies strictly. It deals damage to an enemy that you select and then all enemies below them. So this type of damage can actually bypass the stealthy trait because it can also bypass submerge because it's not a damage to all enemies because you're only selecting one enemy and then it does all the ones below it. So this troop has kind of a tricky little workaround with against those submerged enemies and the stealthy enemies. So that's why it's ranked number 7 for me. Moving on to number 6, we have the Water Elemental from the Sunken Fleet down in the Underworld. And this troop is an elemental. And if you do have the Mirage Queen, which is also from this faction, and you fully trait the Mirage Queen, you will, and if you include that in a team with this one, it can start with 50% mana because it makes all elementals start with 50%. And so you can cut that 13 mana down in half, and so it has the potential to have that really easy ability to start up really quickly. Now the thing here is it is a damage to all enemies. It does for me 28 damage, but then it stuns them, and that's the really important part, and that's why this troop is number 6 for me, is that it will stun them all. So it does damage to all enemies, and then it stuns all of those enemies, which is really, really great. I love stun. Alright, so moving on to the top 5. We are here, top 5. This is the Ethereal Sentry. Now, the Ethereal Sentry is from the Hall of Guardians faction. and it mitigates spell and skull damage. Spells by 50% and skulls by 25%. It's hard to kill. This thing only has a low mana cost. It only has 10. Its ability will increase an ally's attack by their armor. It creates a light storm as well, but that's kind of a minor benefit here. Increasing an ally's attack by their armor is huge. So, for example, you could put this troop in a team with High King Iron Gut, for example, and once his attack is over 100, it's 100% Devour. And if you're using it in a delve where all of your allies' stats are boosted, it will make it really, really easy to double your attack or make your attack really, really high. And the Shield of Urskaya weapon in combination with the Ethereal Sentry here, oh man, you can get your attack up there so fast. Like if you cast the shield on yourself and then you cast this on the hero class after that, you can increase your attack by some really, really high amounts. So this troop, I think, is definitely worth getting for sure. That's my number 5. Moving on to number 4. We have the Drowned Sailor from the Sunken Fleet. This is an empowered converter troop. It will convert yellow gems to blue, and then there's a 20% chance to death mark the last 2 enemies boosted by gems converted. So this troop here is great for converting in gems to blue. So if you're running a team where you want blue mana right away, this is one of those empowered troops. You can get that blue mana pretty quick early on. So yeah, it's a good troop worth having in your collection. Another thing to note is that it is an elemental, so it could get some boosted stats if you include it in an all elemental team. And it's also considered an undead, so that could work that way too. Now, moving on to 3, we have the Grave Seer. And this troop you've probably seen way more than the Drowned Sailor. I was going to say Drunken Sailor, but yeah, the Drowned Sailor. So this one's, you've probably seen this way more than the other one. Grave Seer is from the Crypt Keepers faction down in the Underworld. It's considered an undead troop as well as a mystic. Now, it is an empowered converter, so once you unlock all those traits, it's going to start with full mana. It will transform green gems to purple, but it will also enchant the strongest ally. And almost always your hero class weapon is going to be considered the strongest ally. So if you want to enchant your hero weapon, this is a great troop to do that, as well as transforming green gems to purple. And that's why it's number 3 for me. Now, moving on to the top 2, and you guys probably already know what the 2 are, but you're probably wondering in what order I have them in. Is 2 going to be Gargoyle, or is 2 going to be Harpy Mage? Yeah, it was a little bit hard to decide for me, so let's just move straight on to number 2. It is the Gargoyle. This thing is fantastic. It's really powerful. 14 mana cost. It's from the Hall of Guardians faction in the Underworld. It mitigates spell damage and skull damage by 25 and 50%. And it will deal 36 splash damage to an enemy boosted by all allies' attack. And it will explode 2 gems. So this troop right here is really good in teams where you're increasing all of your allies' attack. And there is a couple of troops like Chief Dargon, and there is Luther. Luther you get out very early on in the game in the class or in Kingdom quest lines. I think it's one of the first troops that you actually get. So Luther can go really well with this troop to increase all allies' attack, and this troop does a lot of damage. If you have a team where you have like 2 Gargoyle, Luther, and Mountain Crusher, you can do some serious damage with this team and this troop. So that's why it's number 2 for me. And I just had to put, for me, personally, my number 1 troop for that's non-legendary in the Underworld has to be the Harpy Mage. The Harpy Mage is amazing. It starts with 75% mana. It only takes usually 1 3 match of yellow or red to get this thing fully powered up. It's from the Stone Song Eerie down there in the Underworld, but this thing is considered a Strix and a Mystic troop. Its ability is that it will conjure a dust storm. Then you choose an ally and explode 22 gems of one of their colors. So you can choose which color almost to explode on the board, and you can constantly keep the board moving and explode almost everything, as well as getting that dust storm going. So this almost works kind of like a mountain crusher in the sense that it creates a dust storm, because you're going to get more brown mana coming down on the board. And in fact, it works really great with Mountain Crusher. But there's so many. The Harpy Mage can be put in almost any team as long as you're not blocking its colors, and it will make that team instantly better because of how much mana you can generate with this troop. So, yeah, this is my number 1 non-legendary troop from the Underworld, and you can get it in the Stone Song Eerie down there in the Underworld with those portal shards. So that's it for this video, guys. That's my top 20 troops from top 20 troops that are not legendary troops from the Underworld. Thanks for watching as always, and if you have an opinion on different troops that I didn't include in here, feel free to post them in the comments section below. Thanks for watching, guys. I'll catch you on the next video. Later.